It's nice to meet you and have you on at a distance.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. What brought you to DC? You just moved to DC, right?
Yes, a week from today was when we started driving here. So we got here on Wednesday last week. My roommate actually is going to Georgetown Law, and he and his fiance invited me to go with them. And I have lived in Tulsa all 27 years of my life, so I was just itching to get out and do something different. So I keep telling everybody it's not a new chapter, it's a whole nother book for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And were there any particular difficulties moving during a pandemic? I'm sure that was a little bit more stressful.
That wasn't so bad. Moving with my two cats was probably the harder part than the pandemic. But what was hard about the pandemic with moving was just not really being able to say goodbye to everybody. So we had a few like social distance hangout sessions because we even had a COVID scare in our house. It ended up, one of my roommates tested positive, but then had negatives after that and had a negative antibody. So there was a period of time when we were scared we had it too. So yeah, there was definitely, we didn't get to say a goodbye to a lot of people. So yeah.
DC is a big change. It brings
I love it.
It brings to mind this, what has it been like working in Tulsa, a place that, if you know about theater and the performing arts, that actually has quite a few institutions and it has productions going on all the time. But I guess it's not known as one of those theater communities in that classical sense.
Well, and I think the reason why is because there's a difference between being a working actor and just being in production, lots of productions. There aren't a whole lot of opportunities for actors in Tulsa to work. We only have one equity company, which is Tulsa Project Theater, and their productions are pretty limited. Heller Theater Company, who I'm vice president for, they actually do pay actors. It's small, but it's just something for their time and their efforts, and even if it's just gas money going back and forth to rehearsals. But for the most part, no other theater company pays actors. So the 17, 18 years of community theater that I've done, I would say 95% of it is for free. So
Wow.
yeah. You have a lot of people in the industry in Tulsa that do it just because they love it, and which is very honorable, and community theater would not survive without volunteers. But yeah, so much of it is volunteered.
What can the city and the institutions do to improve those circumstances and make it more fair for the people putting on the productions and the actors?
Well, the city used to actually fund a couple different theaters. So when Clark Theater was at Clark Park, it was a city institution that got funding from the city. Same thing with Heller Theater. It was at Heller Park, and so it got, but I think it was 2014 when Mayor Dewey Bartlett at the time started slashing resources to, actually might have even been before that, because Clark and Heller then moved into Henthorne Park. And then once Dewey Bartlett started slashing even more budgetary stuff for the arts, they had to become their own privatized institution. Same with the Tulsa PAC. The Performing Arts Center used to be a city institution, and now it's a privatized, so I feel like the city in the past has tried to give resources, and through either budgetary cuts or new management or whatever it is, that's not something that's actively happening now. Most of the money that is poured into the arts comes from grants and from donations and from tickets. So, that's really how the theater companies stay afloat.
Yeah. And are the performing arts one of those, what I'm trying to ask is, I know that some institutions who are donation based have to kind of cater to what the donors want to see when it comes to the productions that come through and stuff like that. Is the same true in theater?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You do have a loyal subscriber base that is not only paying for the season tickets, but they're paying for a ticket to the fundraiser, and they're, you know, throwing in their money for the silent auction. You know, that there definitely is theater run by what a certain public wants, just because they're the ones that are footing the bill and making it happen.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. And so recently you directed a production of Hamlet entirely over Zoom, and that I haven't personally seen that, but I heard it got great reviews, and I read some of
Well,
those
I've got a
reviews.
recording. I've got a recording if you're interested. I definitely send it your way. My proudest thing about it was that it wasn't, you know, 3-4 hours long, that it was a pretty condensed, abridged version of Hamlet, still with all the Shakespearean text that I could squeeze in there. But yeah, I did dramatic cuts to the script.
So what were some of the limitations having to do that, the performances virtually, and did doing it virtually in any way allow you some freedoms that you don't have otherwise?
Well, the first freedom is I had never directed a full Shakespeare production. I had directed a couple scenes for some pub crawls that were Shakespeare themed and things like that, but I had never gotten to undertake a full production. So that in itself was really freeing, being able to even do that over Zoom. But I think one of the difficulties was everybody's in a different space with different types of technology. Like, I found out very early on that the cast members that had Google Chromebooks couldn't do all the same features over Zoom that the rest of us could do, you know, so learning what everybody's abilities and what their technology abilities were, that was a challenge. But I mean, I think it worked out, but it definitely, we had to have actor check-ins where everybody would, as you entered in, you know, checking your video, your sound, and when I would share my screen for the transition, they had to, you know, put it on their screen so it wouldn't take, you know, there were like these processes that we found out through the rehearsals that would happen over on their end. And of course, I always had, you know, I was working from my computer, but I would also have it on my phone to see what the audience would be seeing, so that as, you know, so even if it looked a little bit weird and different for an actor, I'd be able to say, well, it's coming across totally fine for the audience, so I wouldn't worry about it. So
it seems like that just adds this whole other technical layer, because isn't it hard enough putting on a production of Shakespeare, like with what normally goes into it, but it seems adding that technological layer would just...
Definitely. Well, and we only rehearsed it in 6 days. So
wow.
Our first rehearsal was on Sunday, and we rehearsed every night and performed it on Saturday. So even, that tight schedule to rehearse Shakespeare and then, add the technical element on top of it. Yeah, it was definitely
and there was
a challenge.
There was a production of Shakespeare's sonnets as well. Did you
that
also
was the
direct
most
that?
recent one. I did. Right after Hamlet closed, I was asked to direct sonnets, and that was, you know, mid-May. Mm-hmm. And so much changed between mid-May and mid-June, even in that month. That was with George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder, and, you know, this movement, Black Lives Matter, really started to blossom and take shape. And I didn't want, like, I had originally picked out all these sonnets to do kind of this evening of love sonnets and about love through the ages and time and blah, blah, blah. But I totally redid my concept, just because I didn't want to be doing art that was ignoring what was happening outside our window. So I went through all 150 something sonnets again and picked out the ones that really resonated with me about this movement. And I was really pleased with what we were able to tell, even with words as old as Shakespeare's, that we could make them poignant to now. So
That's really interesting that something written so long ago can still ring true today with you know, I would say some of the issues we're facing in our country are also very, very old and are connected to these historical issues. But I don't know, there's always some truth in Shakespeare, no matter the situation. It's
Yeah, one of
universal.
my favorites, SC King. I wish I remembered which sonnet number it was, but he's jealous of all these different people's, this man's this and that man's that or whatever. But he sets, his camera comes on and he sets it up and he's sitting on the curb. And you can just immediately tell, like, he's sitting on the curb because he's being interrogated. Like, a police officer has set him down, and you just, all of his focal points about this man's that, and like, it was so moving because you just, even with these words, you're right, that are 400 years old, that they can mean something and create a connection, that many years later.
And how further along that question, how do you see social justice, activism connecting with the performing arts and with theater?
I think it has to, and for so long it hasn't. I think, and we kind of touched upon this earlier, so much of theater is corporate, and you're having to cater to, especially in Oklahoma, you're having to cater to a type of audience that doesn't want to be challenged and doesn't want to be provoked and called to action. And I think in order for theater to survive and not become this dusty, stale art form that isn't relevant anymore, I think it has to adapt, and it has to be, like we've always talked about, holding the mirror up to society to then smash the mirror, like it's got to be something that makes you feel something, and entertained isn't always the feeling that it should be going for. I get that, yeah, there are like beautiful, fun musicals and plays that are lighthearted and great. Like, I mean, I love those too. I just think that we need to be elevating more people of color in the theater, especially not just as acting roles, but in directing roles and creative team roles, and even in the board of director roles. I mean, it's still predominantly run by white people that are doing their best, doing our best. But I think there's a campaign on Broadway right now that's Pass the Mic, and these famous white Broadway actresses are letting women of color take over their Instagram and show their ability. So I feel like it's not our time anymore to be showing the same stories that we've all grown up with and have been told are the end all be all when it comes to theater. There's so many other stories out there, which is one of the reasons I love being part of Heller Theater Company is we are committed to producing new original works of stories that are happening right now. But I think that in order for theater to survive in post-COVID world, that it has to let go of some of the traditional now I'm thinking of Fiddler on the Roof. I'm thinking of tradition now, but yeah, it has to, very much like Fiddler on the Roof. Like Tevye has to let go of these traditions in order to let his daughters thrive and grow, and so.
And just like Shakespeare, those other stories will always be there. There will always be recordings. There's the film adaptations. Was it 2019 that you starred in My Fair Lady?
It was, yeah, February, 2019. Yeah. So it seems so long ago.
And what's the main difference for you between acting and directing? How have you made that transition?
I will say, as an actor, you only have to worry about yourself and your lines, what you're bringing to the table, the work that you're doing. And directing, you have to worry about everything, like literally everything else. So it definitely, I have to be in the right mind, and I don't know, I've worked with directors that seem kind of like they're phoning it in the whole time just because they've done it so many times. And for me, directing is such a huge challenge. It's somehow, no matter how prepared I am, something still comes my way in rehearsal. So, you know, something still challenges me, makes me think, makes me reassess how I'm doing things, you know, that. So I appreciate the growth that I've experienced by directing recently, because I've only been directing, I think, Clark Youth Theater, which is where I grew up. The first time I ever directed was with them back in 2016, 17. So I'm a fairly new director. So I think that for me, having acted for 18 years, it's harder to challenge me in that way. I still do get challenged, but I'm definitely learning a lot more as a director.
And how does one make that transition? I don't know. Is it something that you've learned by experience? Just being in so many productions, you see how directors work with the cast and work with the crew. Is that really the best way to learn, being around it? Or is there something that you wish you could have told yourself several years ago?
You know, I haven't gotten to the part where I'm able to give myself advice yet. I think I'm still learning, but yeah, I think most of it did come from experience, which took a long time, and I had a lot of bad experiences too, but learning what works and what doesn't work, and how different directors approach productions. One of my favorite phrases I would hear from a director is, "I'm an actor's director," meaning that they had been an actor for so long and they made that transition to direct. So they were approaching it in the same way, or at least they were communicating with us in a way that we could understand as an actor. Because so often visions get lost in translation. But I also like the directors that come in and say, "I'm a writer's director." You know, I started off as a playwright. And so the words really, you know, that there's all these different backgrounds and styles of directing that come in. And of course I have some favorite ones that I enjoy working with over and over again, but like, it's always a great thing to challenge yourself by working with new people, because literally everybody does it different.
Yeah. And this is a random question. It just popped into mind. What are some
I'm ready.
What are some of your favorite productions, if you had to do like an all-time most meaningful?
You know, this was right before the 2016 election. But Cabaret, Theater Tulsa's Cabaret, where I was Sally Bowles, and my roommate who's going to law school, he was choreographer in that. I just think it was a brilliant cast. The director, Laura Schoch, was amazing. Catherine Conger is the music director. I mean, the creative team was amazing. And I felt like what we were producing at that time reflected what so many of us feared would happen in the 2016 election. So performing wise, I think that is probably my favorite. However, in 2014, some friends and we produced Bear, a pop opera. And we just we created a company that was really goofy and had a made up name, just so we could do this one production. But it was the same summer that the Supreme Court had ruled Oklahoma's ban on gay marriage unconstitutional. And our show was centered around this gay couple in Catholic school. And we actually ended up donating over $5,000 to the Equality Center afterward. You know, like what we were doing and producing theater, it meant something to the community around us. So that's probably my favorite, like, proudest moment I've ever, because I helped produce it. I was in it too, but yeah, because it was just a group of friends and we loved this musical. We'd always wanted to do it. So it kind of came from a selfish place, but we still ended up giving back and feeling like we made a difference just in our voice as well.
Yeah.
But,
those are great answers. I'm glad I thought to ask that. And so I feel like I'm kind of all over the place today, just a little scattered, but you worked for atTCC in the performing arts for quite a while. So what were you involved with there, and could you talk about that some?
So my TCC journey actually starts when I was back in high school. I worked part-time in their ticket office. It was one of my first like grown-up jobs. And I worked there almost 3, 4 years. Before I started working for Celebrity Attractions, and I did go to school at TCC as well as a theater student and performed in a few of their shows as well. And then it wasn't until August of 2018 that I went back and applied for their marketing assistant for performing arts. Got the job, got to see all the people that I left behind and loved, and got to meet some new people too. And what I loved about that job is I kind of had my hand in everything that TCC was doing performing arts wise. So being housed at the Performing Arts Center, I was in the ticket office still helping patrons one-on-one and getting to work with them, but also working for the Signature Symphony at TCC, which is a professional orchestra that uses all local musicians. And all the musicians are teachers that either work at schools or studios. And so it's very education centered with Signature Symphony, but also getting to help promote the theater department and the music department that were also on the Southeast campus. So getting to help promote their concerts and productions. And then the ones that were kind of out of my range were the ones at the Center for Creativity. I still kind of had an idea of what was going on, but yeah, the art department, digital media, mass communications, graphic design, all of those great stuff. So it was just arts all the time, which is my kind of job. Because if I can't make it as, if I'm not working as an actor, then still being able to, like I said, work with patrons, work with the performers, work with the people that are behind the scenes. Because it really does take a community for every single thing that's happening. So just being a part of that body is very rewarding.
And it really shows that there are so many layers, you know. There's the actor on the stage, but then there's the director behind the curtain, and then there's marketing.
The guy pulling the curtain.
Yeah, but then beyond that, there's even marketing and ticketing, all these things that have to happen that people don't consider, that those are also things that get actors on the stage.
Well, and the ticketing has really been a rewarding job experience, because like I said, I started part-time at TCC, but then I moved on to Celebrity Attractions and worked for their Broadway touring shows as a ticket office representative. And then I even moved over to BOK Center and worked in the box office for their concerts and events. And then, went back to TCC to work full time. So I've really got a good hand on different ticketing softwares and how that front of house process works before you even walk into the door to see the show. And it takes a village to make it all happen.
And then with the Hamlet production and the Shakespeare sonnets were put on by the Orbit Initiative. Could you talk about what the Orbit does in Tulsa?
Yeah, I would love to. So the Orbit Initiative started over a year ago, and it started out as satellites throughout the city that offered free classes based on whatever the teacher was interested in teaching, what the community was interested in learning. So, I mean, they had acting, singing, dancing, bucket drumming, jewelry making, just really anything that was arts related that the community was interested in. And at the end of this year of free classes, the Orbit Initiative put on a production of The Tempest at the Tulsa PAC in their big Chapman Theater, and had everybody who participated in the classes, everybody from the community who was interested in being in it, they provided resources to make sure that they could be in it. So we had a cast of over 200 people. We had childcare provided, we had meals provided at rehearsals, we had a transportation system to go pick up people who couldn't make it, so it really, the whole process opened my eyes to also how much privilege there is in the theater world, that because I have a full-time job, I was able to rehearse every night and, have the weekends off so I could perform. And not everybody has that ability to drive themselves, to pay for drive-through meals before rehearsals every day. That the Orbit Initiative was breaking down those barriers so that people who had never even set foot in the PAC to see a show were able to perform in one. So it was really incredible, and they continued doing it this past year. Obviously had to put things on hold because of COVID related matters. But we were supposed to put on another production this summer that got canceled. We were going to do the musical version of Twelfth Night. But again, that got put on hold. And so I really appreciated that they still wanted to continue offering arts during this time, that, you know, that in the productions that we've done, As You Like It, Hamlet, Evening of Sonnets, they just did Love's Labor's Lost for kids, that all of these are free streaming services, you know, that we're not making anybody pay to come see it, because we didn't even make people pay to come see the shows that we produced in the huge Chapman PAC. You just had to go online and reserve tickets. And so making it as accessible as possible. And I really appreciate that that's what the Orban Initiative in Tulsa is doing.
And what kind of changes have you seen with the people getting involved in this? Because it seems that it's even different from community theater in the classic sense of how community theater functions. So what was it like witnessing that firsthand and being involved with
one of my favorite groups that were involved, I'm trying to remember it was East something, the satellite, but it was a group of senior citizens that getting to see them be in the show and be backstage, and some of them having been in productions in the past, or some of it having been their first, and then also continue, you know, finding them on Facebook and Instagram and getting to keep up with these senior citizens that love art as much as I do, and that are always looking for the next thing to watch. It really helped broaden my theatrical community of people that I probably would, not to be ageist, but people that I probably wouldn't have gotten to interact with or meet in the first place. And now getting to build these connections where every time I go live on Instagram, I can see a couple of them that, you know, like it's,
yeah.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think building that community was the best thing about being part of those productions.
That's great. And we've talked about some of the successes that have happened in your own career during the pandemic, such as these shows that the Orbit was able to help put on. But how more broadly have you seen COVID-19 affect the performing arts? Because, I mean, the goal is to get butts in the seats and sell tickets, and, you know, just like the cinema industry or others where, you know, a large body of people have to be gathered in one place, and we can't do that now. So what are some of those effects?
Well, I think for so many people in the theater world, Broadway is the end all be all. And so I think it originally shutting down was pretty daunting, but now that they've come out saying that they're shutting down all the way till January. I think January 3rd is the next date of when Broadway can potentially reopen. So I think the standard that is Broadway for so many, you know, theater companies, that's really disheartening that it seems like we're not going to be able to gather. And I know not everybody's doing, I feel like there are, I mean, I don't want to name names unless I'm allowed to, but like there are theater companies that are still doing shows just in a socially distant capacity. So
like outdoors,
like I know,
for example.
Sometimes not even that, like
Yeah.
Muskogee Little Theater, who I love, and I love a lot of people that are there. They continued with their production of Grease and added more shows so that they could socially distance the seats that are inside, and, you know, sold out all the shows from doing that. And then I feel like Sand Springs is trying to have auditions for something that's coming up, you know, so there are definitely companies in the greater Tulsa area that are maybe taking precautions. I'm sure they are, but are not necessarily slowing down, or still trying to find ways on how we can gather live.
Yeah.
And, you know, I keep seeing articles and pictures of different ideas on how to have theater, you know, with cars all around, or how to have a theater space where people can be socially distant. And I really think it goes back to we have to adapt to survive and thrive. And I'm not convinced at this point that gathering is the best. That I really do think that the virtual world, even what you're doing right now with the interview, like I really do think that this is going to be the future, because surely this COVID scare isn't the first time we're going to be confined to our homes and having to, yeah, that we have, while I think it's important to take precautions and to try to get back up on our feet and perform live again, I think that adapting and finding new ways to reach audiences in the confines of this space is really where theater needs to be heading. And I tried to explain to somebody, because it really isn't like film acting. Even when we were doing the sonnets and when we were doing Hamlet, it wasn't like film acting, and it wasn't like stage acting, and it wasn't like it was a marriage between the two. It really is its whole other cinematic art form, where you can play with the space. Like one of Bailey Workman's Hamlet was amazing. And one of the things that she was really good at was she played with her space a lot, and she'd come up like this and talk to you, and then she would come back up, like finding ways on how we can make this space engaging for our audience and cinematic while also being a live theatrical experience. I feel like moving more in that direction is what we need to be doing, because like I said, this is not going to be the first time that we have to stay in our homes and quarantine and socially distant. I feel like it's never going to go back to how it was. And I've talked to a lot of audience members that have autoimmune diseases or that they are at high risk, and literally until there is a cure, they're not going to be able to go out again.
Yeah.
They've already they know at this point that they're not going to get to go see a live show in person anymore. So I don't want to leave those people behind by trying to plan for something live to make it back to the way it was. So
that's a great answer, and it made me think that National Theater Live had already been going on for quite some time before all this, but that's different in that it's filming in a more cinematic way of a performance where all the actors are on stage. But it sounds like with this issue and actors not even being able to interact in person most of the time, that it really will allow for some possibilities and ways to maybe reimagine old productions as you did, and hopefully some people are writing new productions that will be just as exciting and allow for possibilities that
I'm definitely trying to write something right now that is Zoom conscious. The idea is that the play is happening over a Zoom meeting, so they're talking about not being able to hear each other. Things are, instead of trying to, you're right, adapt an old play or a live production into working for Zoom, that there are new works coming out that are specifically for these kind of virtual platforms. And I think a lot of great stories will come out of that, just based on the how everybody's isolation experiences are different.
Yeah.
But
and there's a humor to it on the one hand. Like when I first joined the meeting and you couldn't hear me, it's almost like a very tactile like humor, but then there's also that tragedy or that drama to it, the fact that people can't be together. So
exactly.
Yeah. And so next year you if the pandemic is hopefully over, you'll be coming back to Tulsa to put on a production and direct a production of The Revisionists.
No,
Okay.
no, it's I'm just acting in it. It's World Stage Theater Company.
Okay.
We were supposed to be doing The
Revolutionists, sorry, yeah.
You're fine, you're fine.
Okay.
That was supposed to happen in April, and so yes, they've rescheduled it for April of 2021. So yes, Corona willing, that will be the plan, and I'll be back in Tulsa to do that.
Yeah, working with Root, I had already put in The Revolutionists into our events database,
Oh, fabulous.
way back when, I don't know, January or February, I'd entered it into the system. So when I saw that you were working on that next year, I realized it had been rescheduled.
I even have, let me grab my set of cards that they gave us. Yeah, World Stage Company, they're pretty, so we all got, so this is me
Oh, cool.
on these playing cards.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's a 4-woman show about the women of the French Revolution. And so I play Charlotte Corday, who killed Jean-Paul Marat in the bathtub. And we've got Marie Antoinette and Olympe de Gouges. So, and then I think the only fictional character is a Haitian woman who's there talking about while, you know, France is revolting against their king, they still have slaves in the Caribbean. And, you know, so,
Yeah.
but I'm excited to come back to it because it's a great cast, and I love World Stage and what they're doing. They're one of the companies that I'm happy to work for free because I believe in their mission of sharing cultural stories that Tulsa isn't accustomed to hearing and getting to experience. So I love what they're doing.
Anything else coming up for you that you want to mention, whether it's any kind of project?
You know, I'll probably get to direct for Heller's Short Festival. We were going to have our annual Heller Shorts this year, but obviously that was canceled. So we've transitioned it to an online virtual festival. So I didn't meet the requirements for living around the area to submit and write for, but I can at least apply to direct. So I'm hoping to do that. And that's, oh gosh, I should know the dates for that I don't off the top of my head. But so far and then there's some more stuff that Heller kind of has in the works that I'm not at liberty to discuss at this point because it's not, but just because it's not public yet. But yeah, I think that there's definitely some opportunities that are coming my way for some more virtual productions.
That's great. Well, we look forward to directing people to your work and the work of those organizations you're involved with. So
I appreciate it.
Thank you for talking with me. My last question that I ask everybody on At a Distance is, what is one thing that you miss most from pre-pandemic times that you haven't been able to do since social distancing began?
You know, I don't want to sound like an alcoholic millennial for saying this, but I really do miss socializing at the bar. One of the hot spots that my friends and I always loved going to was karaoke. And so I miss drinking and socialize, fellowship, you know, and singing with my friends. I miss that the most.
Well, thank you for talking with me. Best of luck in DC, and I'm looking forward to these future productions.
Thank you, Mason. It was great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
See ya.